Hi, everybody. Welcome to AdRoll Live. We go live every Wednesday morning, 10:30 a.m. Pacific time. We're here in San Francisco to cover all sorts of topics related to advertising, marketing, all of the good stuff. I'm Laura Finity. I'm the multimedia content manager for AdRoll. And coming up today, we're going to be covering a lot about brand identity. We're going to be chatting with Jesse Vaughan, who's the head of creative at AdRoll. We also have some sneak peek of work advice from Nori, who is a Pomeranian dog at AdRoll. That's coming up. Before we do jump into our conversation with Jesse today, I've got a few things to promote, but of course we are live. So I love it if you get in touch. You can contact us in the chat box. Just tell us where you're watching from, say hi. And of course, at any point you can ask questions to Jesse throughout our chat today. So we love to get in touch with you. We are live on Facebook and on YouTube now as of last week. So if you want to watch back or share any of the content that you see today, you can grab links for Facebook and for YouTube. Coming up with AdRoll over the next few weeks, we've got some great, not only blog resources, but also some webinars going on. So on the 18th of May, we have free 5 steps to boost your business in 90 days. This is happening on Monday, May 18th, and it's at 10 a.m. Pacific time. That's 1 p.m. Eastern time. So if you feel like COVID has brought your business back to the starting line, and you're not alone on that for sure, this webinar is going to help you to navigate the evolving marketplace. We built out a small business booster kit, which is also a tongue twister, which is aimed at getting you back on your feet and off to the races. So that's going to be with Chris, our VP of Customer Success, and Laura, our Senior Director of Product Marketing. They're going to cover a whole variety of topics in that webinar. There'll be financial resources where you can find what you might need for finances. Also details of our 90-day free trial of AdRoll's growth marketing platform. And then as well as that, things like advice on content for ebooks, blog posts, webinars, making sure you can kind of get the most out of the opportunities for your business. And then also just advice on community forums and partner relationships, opportunities and things like that. So I'm going to post the link to that webinar into the chat box. So if you want to join up and you want to get registered, you can find the information in there. All right, so today, as I mentioned, we're chatting with Jesse Vaughan, who is the head of creative at AdRoll, and you should be here. Morning.
Morning. How's it going?
Morning. Oh, I can't hear you. Yeah, there we go. Good.
Okay.
How are you doing today?
Good. Still kind of waking up a little bit, but yeah, time is kind of just all one big blur, but hanging in there.
I know like our time over here, it's 10:30 a.m. So I'm still on my kind of like, I'm on my second cup of coffee. So, just getting started today.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I'm still going. I'm trying not to be like super like amped up on this. So
yeah, don't get too wired. So let's talk a little bit about yourself first. As I mentioned, you're the head of creative at AdRoll. So what does that mean? What do you do? What are you all about?
Yeah, that's a great question. So yeah, as head of creative, I oversee all of our marketing creative specifically. So we have a lean but mighty team of designers that are managing everything from the marketing website to all of our marketing collateral. And yeah, historically the creative unit has been a rock within our core marketing team. But recently, over the past few years, we've taken a jump into really taking command of our brand, controlling our destiny with our messaging and who we're speaking to. And yeah, making sure that all of the creative that we do produce kind of adheres to that brand and sort of pumps out that message correctly.
And of course, for AdRoll, it's kind of funny, like when you think of creative, like sometimes it's like the obvious things that come to mind, which is very much like, you see in the corner of our live stream on this side, the AdRoll logo, and you think, okay, that's part of brand identity. But, we are also, we create tons of blog posts, ebooks, we do things like live streams like this. We're constantly like it feels like every bit of content, everything we do and create, but basically requires a creative team.
Exactly. Yeah. I think brand is one of those things that everything that you do as a company is internally and externally like has some tinge of brand to it, right? If you're doing like internal presentations, if you're doing like the ebooks and this live stream, all these pieces have inherently, they're tied to the brand. So It's a pretty important responsibility and a big one, but one that's extremely fun and challenging, and something that myself and the team kind of, we take it head on, and it's a good challenge.
Yeah, I'll take the opportunity to give a kudos to the creative team, because you guys are small and mighty. There's only a few of you working away, and you're covering everything for like NextRoll, for AdRoll, for Rollworks as well. Of course, all of our business units that we have. So thanks. There's a little public appreciation. Yeah. I do have, of course, like in the office, usually when we're not sheltering in place, we do have a policy at AdRoll where people can bring their dogs into the office. And I'd asked you to share a video of your dog, Frankie. So I just wanted to show this because I love Frankie so much. I think actually what I love about that video as well is like when finally Frankie gets the dog biscuit, the like crunching sound. So very agile pupper.
I know we've been working on his the skills of he's if we take him somewhere, like sometimes we go to the coffee shop across the street, and they'll throw some treats at him, and he catches them midair just fine. But at home, he's like, I'm not gonna play that game. I'm just gonna let it hit the ground and then I'll eat it.
Well, maybe he just does the lazy vibe, right? He's like, it's fine. I'm in my home environment. I'll just catch the snacks whenever I want to.
Exactly.
He's so cute. So I could sneak in a video in there. All right. So brand identity. We've kind of touched a little bit, obviously, just chatting about like the work you do at AdRoll and kind of like what that means for our brand. But like, what is brand identity? Like, what does that cover?
I mean, brand identity as a whole covers a lot. The way we think about it and the way we've worked about with it internally at AdRoll is thinking about basically two components, those being the tangible assets and the intangible assets. And that's kind of the main takeaway when it comes to, how customers and how people experience a brand. The easy part is the tangible stuff, like the logo that you see and all the assets that we just talked about, things that we create. Those are, those build up your brand library. You need to have a logo. You need to have color palettes and all these other pieces. The more difficult angle or the difficult piece in it is the intangible, the emotions and the experience that customers take away when they interact with all of your tangible assets. So you might think that you have really complete control over one or maybe even the other, but it's the combination of sort of your messaging, the tangible things that you're producing, and a lot of deliberate decisions that go into that that kind of affect the intangible feeling that you get when customers are interacting with it. And I think there's a lot of areas that can be easily overlooked when it comes to considering, what goes into a brand identity.
And we were chatting a little bit about brands that, obviously, like there are some brands, obviously huge, massive brands around the world that are very famous and have managed to kind of like reach another level of branding, really like an art status.
Yeah, I think there's a ton of great examples of brands that have kind of that I think I like to categorize them as there's definitely iconic brands, classic brands, and then there are these brands and companies that have reached that status, but also kind of, like you say, that they're art, and they're also, I believe, they're connecting with their customers on really deep levels in terms of associating with the brand, building an association. So if you think of like really classic brands like Coca-Cola or McDonald's, like those are really established and they're really big and broad. But when you think of like Apple, or you think of Nike, you think of these bigger companies that have really powerful messages. I like Apple because they are, selling you a good product, but they're also selling you, they're creating an environment. They're creating a feeling that you get when you interact with not only their with everything about them. Their products are their brand, like their website, their interactions, even their stores. They're a big part of their brand. And when you think of Apple, you think of something very specific. You think of something very. There's an emotional connection when you think of that brand. If you think of Nike and kind of what they've done, sort of crafting this really, just this connected a brand that's really enforcing, pushing everyone to do more, to do better, or to just do the best that you can, and also to celebrate the champions that are associated with that brand. You start to realize that you're interested and you're invested in them, not only because they're providing a product for you and a good product for you, but you're now bought into the story that they're telling, and you're bought into the message that they're selling. Red Bull's another good example where I think it's pretty funny to think that they've aligned themselves with, it's an energy drink, but they've aligned themselves with extreme athletes and a lot of other different sort of subcultures that kind of embrace this kind of attitude that they push with their brand identity. And I think it's awesome that like you kind of go to their website and they're not really talking about product, they're talking about all the things that they're involved with, the things that they kind of do to support the communities that they're in. And I think that's a really big piece of branding that a lot of people also don't really take into consideration. An example that I really like is the Hundreds, like an old head streetwear brand. And one of the reasons I like them is because I was first got into them because they had a really big blog. They built a really big community. They were talking about things outside of just clothing, outside of just selling products. It was about culture, community. One of the co-founders, Bobby Hundreds, has a really great book where he kind of explains that the priority for them was building community first, and that really led to creating a brand identity that people could connect with. And I felt that really early on in both my creative career and just first being observant of brands. And I think that was a huge part of their success. And I think a lot of the other examples that I gave, part of their success is that they are building community around that. So I think those are some of the larger examples of brands that have elevated themselves through not just thinking about what it is that they're selling and how that they're presenting themselves, but really being invested in the emotion that they're bringing to the table and the communities that they're creating with their products and their brands as a whole.
Yeah, I feel like I was recently, I think if you're like myself and you're working with content quite a lot, you're often being sent large files, you're like downloading things, and WeTransfer, I think, is also another great example where I've seen it's a definite switch, because I always associated WeTransfer just with like, okay, someone sent me a file that I'm going to download. And then, one day I kind of noticed like, oh, they have this amazing content that they create and they speak to the community of artists, because majority of people who are perhaps using it to share files are sharing videos that they've created, sharing content. And they have this beautiful collection of really well curated, conversations around music, art, photography, culture. And it's kind of like, it feels a little bit, so it's not removed from what they actually are, from their product as such, but it's just such an amazing way of building a community. And as a brand, for me, it's just elevated it way more as somebody to consume that content.
Exactly. I think people are so used to being sold a product or seeing ads or traditional advertising and, just having everything kind of, wash over you with seeing all that stuff. And I think people nowadays are really, especially with social media and the internet, like we want community. We want to be around like-minded people. We want to associate ourselves with like-minded companies. We make powerful decisions with all the things that we interact with and purchase and support as a part of our own personal identity. So I think brands are starting to realize, and a lot of up and coming brands are starting to realize, that if we can build a really solid foundation on that, then we could see success. And that could, mean really dedicated customer base. That could mean like really extended reach. You start to stir up a lot of this emotion and build these communities, and you can see a lot of really positive results.
It's funny, actually, with Apple. I know my husband is a designer, and he kind of compares the Apple moment in terms of the unveiling of the iPhone, and then also just like all of the creative that, all of the look that came with that brand identity as being like a defining moment for him as a designer. And just looking at something and thinking like, this is so beautiful and I have to have it and I want it. I think he said the only other place it felt like that was place in Naoshima in Japan. There's an art island, and it's amazing. If you can ever go. And there are some exhibits of the Monet exhibit there, which is just like, it's like they built around the art, so it's like perfect.
Yeah.
Basically, like felt the same way about the Apple advertising branding and everything. So I was like, okay. So it definitely, you know, it hits the spot, and it's affected so much of our advertising since then, and so much of our branding, you know, for other companies since. So
yeah, 100%.
Take a look at some of the D2C brands and so the direct to consumer brands. So obviously, you know, because we're speaking about these kind of larger global corporate companies, but let's focus in on a direct to consumer. Like what are your kind of favorite or like outstanding ones?
Yeah. Kind of like I was alluding to, I think a lot of up and coming D2C brands are taking a lot of cues from, you know, more established brands and really trying to build these communities. I think Casper is a very good example of a company that's not only sort of challenging a space with their business model and kind of how they're approaching just sales in general, but also in building this really deliberate brand to associate with and to connect yourself with. I think I know they have, you know, in-person stores and done a lot of pop-up events and things of that nature. And I think whenever you go in and you interact with their product, their branding, their website, anything, you start to feel like this connection, this subtle connection to like, oh yeah, like I'm feeling really involved with this company, and then I'm starting to build a personal connection with it. One that I've stumbled upon recently is Wild One. It's a boutique pet supply store, and I think I was originally served some Instagram ads for them, and just from the first time I like stepped into their website, I was like, okay, I understand kind of the vibe that's here, and I was fully on board. I was like, this is way different than going to like, you know, like Petco or like even your, you know, down the street pet store. You know, having like these associations, these visual cues, and like this lifestyle that's kind of attached to it. It sounds a little cheesy and a little like a little out there, but I think it's super important. And then one of these other steps of building community is making sure that you're resonating with your audience. And I think brands like Casper, like Wild One, they know who they're speaking to and who they want to have support their brand, and they're creating content and visual identity to really reinforce that. One of the funnier ones that kind of I also think I stumbled upon through an Instagram ad is Liquid Death, which if you haven't heard of is hilarious and awesome. But basically a like death metal branded water company, like just completely random and out there. But something that I think they have identified the audience they want to speak to, and sort of gone all in on it, and I love it. It's so unique and just so like committed to the message and the way they're trying to send it. I think if you either are going to connect with this or you're not, and the people that do connect with it are going to be, again, super all in on it, kind of like I am. So I think it's one of these interesting things where you didn't think that space would exist, but I think with the power of the internet and the power of Instagram and communities, if you are true to, you know, who you want to be as a company, as a brand, and the community you're trying to serve, you're gonna hopefully find the right audience and then get those supporters and reinforce sort of the messaging you're sending. And I think, yeah, those are really strong examples of how up and coming D2C brands are, leveraging community building and establishing solid brand identities and practices to get people to feel things when they interact with them.
I'm hoping at some stage we can get Liquid Death on the live stream, because oops, sorry, again, just going in the middle. As a obviously to look at, you think it looks like an energy drink, or it could even be like a alcoholic beverage, right?
Yeah.
also like the water market is kind of somewhat, I could imagine, perhaps saturated, right? You know, like it's kind of hard to sell and advertise a product that is like there are so many competitors. So, you know, leveraging a somewhat extreme brand to stand out in this situation. Well, I agree. Like I love the visual of it. I think it looks it looks great, and I completely buy into it. So hopefully, it's been working for them as well.
Yeah, exactly. And you're right. Like these are crowded spaces that people are entering. And but if you think about like the competition that they're going up against and the other people that are in that space, like those are very, I mean, like the LaCroix and the Bubblies and these bigger, you know, water companies. And then you're like, well, why not have a black metal water company? Like everyone needs to drink water, so you know.
Hydration is important. So yeah.
Exactly.
So what are the challenges of developing a brand identity?
Yeah,
Broad, I know.
there's yeah, it's a tough question. There are obviously a ton of challenges. If all of us could, anyone starting a brand could you know, easily enter the market and be as strong as the examples we've shared, you know, that'd be amazing. But I think that the bigger challenges are, or the main challenge is staying true to yourself as a company, or you know, the values that you're establishing as a company, and also staying true to your customers. I think out of all the examples that we gave, all the way from the apples to the liquid deaths, they're really considering their customers and the messages that they want to send to them, and how they're marketing to them. And they're not, you know, making assumptions. They're not, yeah, like going down really complex paths. They're just identifying, you know, who they are, their values, and then crafting messages to support that. And I think that's really, it sounds super easy and straightforward to kind of lay out there. And honestly, when you get to the point of, you know, creating logos and resources, materials, and that stuff, those are arguably much easier once you establish your core values and your audience. But those pieces are extremely difficult. So I think that's the main challenge with any brand is making sure that you're resonating and but also staying true and considering your customers along the way.
What about if something's not working, right? You know, like say you do have an existing brand, you know, you've kind of been, you've had your company off the ground for a while, and perhaps like how can you tell if it's not working for you? Or how do you know when's the time to perhaps rebrand and regroup?
Yeah, that's that's another difficult thing to gauge. I think if you're direct to consumer, or if you're selling product, you might start noticing, you know, direct impact on sales if that was the case. Or you might start to see direct feedback within social channels or from your customers themselves as you know, maybe it's just not resonating enough. So I think it's one of those areas, and when you see other brands of any size go through rebrands, it's tough to gauge when is the exact correct time. But I feel like when you internally as a company know maybe you're not as corely aligned with values, or maybe you're starting to get feedback from customers that you know, isn't necessarily resonating with yourself as a business, I think that those are good key indicators of the need to maybe revisit some of your core brand you know, pieces. And sometimes you might not even have that kind of direct information. Sometimes it might take some experimentation. I'm sure all of the great brands that we know and love didn't just, you know, invent those things overnight. Some may have, but I'm sure it takes or it does take experimentation. You know, going out there and figuring stuff out, finding your own voice as a company. And I can't stress enough making sure that you're listening to your customers and taking their input and feedback, and knowing the audience that you're speaking to. Because at the end of the day, if that's, you could have, your brand could be you know, any scale, any amount of detail or polish put to it, but as long as you're, you know, considering your customers' opinions and really crafting messages for them and considering them, then you'll have a successful brand.
I'm just having a look at some of that. I've had a few comments come in just on the chat. Jano had said, if you guys are up for it, we're more than happy if you could critique our site. We started out about a month ago and it's totally taken off thanks to the knowledge of your live streams. Thank you. You can come back, Jano. Thanks for all the value. And there's a link to the site in the chat. So we'll do that. We'll take a look after we finish the live stream and get you guys some feedback. And I mean, probably not from me because I'm definitely not the branding expert, but Jesse is the person to ask. But thank you so much. We appreciate, you trusting us to do that. Also, Peter says, you're my rock, Jesse. I have a feeling he maybe knows you. I mean, or he's a die-hard fan that's come up on the live stream. But also, good morning to Andrina as well, who's just tagging some people to come and watch the live stream and get some knowledge from what we're chatting about today. Thanks so much. So we are live at the moment, just to say, on Facebook and on YouTube. So if you want to get in touch, ask any questions, we're here to do that. So just pop them into the chat box and we'll get to them as we go through the live stream today. So how important would you say, that your brand translates across mediums? And then also you have like internal teams and you have the external teams that you're working with. Like, how important is it that all of that kind of matches with your brand identity?
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously critical that everyone internally, externally is on board with your message. I'm sure if you take a look at the examples that we've gone over, internally, I would assume that they're just as amped and bought into their message as you would envision what they're externally communicating. I think if we go back to the point of adhering to your customer and crafting messaging and marketing that really puts them in the forefront of your mind, I think if you take that as the first step and you derive everything from there, it makes it much easier to have full buy-in for all of your customers and your external pieces that you're creating, but also internally. I think that makes that message a lot more palatable internally, because you're not, no sense in duplicating the work in that we're going to have this particular external message and then we now need to remind everyone in a different way, how we're bought in internally. So I think if you can see and feel excitement from a brand, outside, then you'll be able to have that resonate internally. And that obviously is a lot easier said than done. But again, that goes back to the challenge of understanding your customers and crafting message to really connect with them. Those are really, again, very straightforward, but very difficult things to buy into. But it's a struggle and a challenge that we faced at AdRoll internally over the past. But it's one of those things that just comes from developing and building brands. It's just one of the natural progressions of making sure that you're continuing to build and elevate your presence. So hopefully, if you're doing a great job of putting your customer first, then you shouldn't have as much difficulty making sure that your messaging is resonating and everything's coming back down internally. But it's very important for those things to be aligned, for sure.
Are there any tools you'd recommend, or any ways, in terms of listening to what your customers' needs are? And I know that, again, it's kind of hard to define because it goes across a whole multitude of things that your customer might be kind of like needing and wanting. But like, say when we did a rebranding at AdRoll, did we use any particular kind of like tactics or tools to try and understand better what our customers would like from us?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, obviously, doing customer research and talking with your customers is the easiest and the best. I shouldn't say the easiest, but that's one of the better and more direct ways that you can get feedback is, just talking to existing or potential customers and seeing, how your brand kind of fits in with their decision-making process, or, how you're being perceived. Those can go a long way in informing, how you develop your brand identity and your brand strategies. One of the other things you can do is position and identify the customers you're going after, and develop an internal strategy to make sure that if we're speaking to this particular set of customers, we know that there's this benefit we want to drive, or this audience that we want to resonate with. How can we build the connections and ensure that we're adhering to them? That doesn't necessarily involve talking with customers directly, especially if you don't have the resources to go after and talk with a bunch of customers all at the same time. But it does give you a good solid baseline to say, hey, like these are the core values that we're trying to adhere to based on the audience and the customers that we're trying to speak with. And we're going to hold ourselves to that, and that's what we're going to go off of as a basis. So establishing, the emotions you want to convey, and all these different pieces, that's a huge way of ensuring that that you don't get too lost in crafting your message and pieces like that.
And I also guess if people who are watching, maybe in terms of as a company size, you may have just started something, and be building up your kind of e-commerce brand, and really, like you're saying, trying and testing things. There's nothing wrong with that, and everything evolves over time. With every company, there's always changes. So it's not like once you decide you're stuck to that particular kind of look, feel, and brand.
Yeah, 100%. The most successful brands of all sizes have gone through different phases, and you shouldn't be afraid to try things. I think that's another, at least creatively, I know we can enter either decision paralysis or we want to perfect something, and there's a lot of merit to that. But at the same time, especially in the modern world or the modern day, where people are consuming content very frequently, where there's tons of channels that people are browsing. As long as you're getting something out there and seeing the results, I think that's a huge step and way more impactful than sitting on an idea for weeks or months and trying to perfect it.
Absolutely, it's better to kind of try it and fail than there's more failure in not trying it all, right? So test it and see what happens. Well,
exactly.
Thank you so much, Jesse, for joining us today. We're coming up to a close for our live stream for this morning. But we're going to, obviously you're with us working in-house all the time, and I'm absolutely sure that I'm going to be grabbing you back in for more live streams to share insights and, to go a bit more deeper into some of the nitty and gritty, because obviously as our conversation today is very high level, there's so much to cover. It's an extremely broad topic. I mean, we could literally talk probably for hours about logos or about choosing colors. So I know
100%.
It's really hard to focus in on to rather do such a kind of a large topic, but we encourage anybody watching, if you have a specific topic you would love us to cover coming up, then please do let us know, because we can take that and make that into a live stream and webinars and all the great content that we can make here at AdRoll. But for now, thank you so much, Jesse. Really appreciate you taking the time to chat.
Of course.
Give Frankie a cuddle for us all.
I will do 100%.
Take care. All right, it's Jesse Vaughan, Head of Creative at AdRoll. Thank you so much to him for joining us this morning or this afternoon or this evening, wherever you're watching, because we are live streaming on Facebook and on YouTube. We're live every Wednesday. And coming up, we have some amazing guests. We've got more kind of company profiles coming up. So actually next week, on the live stream, we're going to be chatting with Leon and George and chatting with Renee. So they do lots of amazing indoor plants, as you can see there. We're going to chat about the importance of quality control with their product, creating basically the optimal experience for their customers, and then also just for the kind of mission they're on to open people up to the idea of actually getting plants and not flowers delivered. There's definitely been an increase in this type of company in recent years or months, I feel, whether it's just I'm paying more attention to plants. I'm at that age where I'm loving some indoor plants. I don't know. But I'm really looking forward to talking to Renee about that and finding out more about the industry that they're dealing with and their customers. So that's going to be next week. And before we do finish up for today, I did want to share one more dogs from AdRoll. We had Nori send in a video this week, who is, I believe, a miniature Pomeranian. She's adorable and very fluffy. So here we go. Here is her work from home advice. There we go, Nori, so cute and so small. Literally, she's like tiny. She's very, very small. Thank you for sending in that video. And thank you to everybody who's been getting in touch today, and also your comments. Thank you to Jano. We're going to check out your website. Also, hi, Jason, Julie, Peter, Andrina. Thank you so much. All right, that's it for today's AdRoll Live. We'll be back next week at the same time. Don't hesitate to reach out and get in touch with us. We're on Facebook, we're on LinkedIn, on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. We're on all the places. You can't miss us. And go check out adroll.com, where you can find more blogs, resources, and of course, to sign up for that upcoming webinar, I'll share the link in the chat, but it's also on our website. So go to adroll.com for more. Whatever you're doing, have a great day, have a great week, and stay safe and healthy.